going to attempt to record this so we have it. And we will go until a little before 10, maybe 10 over so, and leave room for room and time for questions and David to answer. I'm going to ask you when you speak to give your name, because that will make it easier for David. So I hear background noise, so you know what that is. So I'm going to change what I said and ask you to all mute, and I will call your name based on how you look on my screen to yourself. And the way you look on my screen is probably the way you are on everybody else's, but it's the best way I can keep us organized and efficient for David. So now, David, I'll ask you, does that make sense to you? David? Oh, you're the only one who doesn't have to mute. David? Okay. Mike Klein, I need you to mute. And Marion, I need you to mute. And Judy and Dottie and Rusty, please. Okay, Howard, I am now, all right, one minute. Let me see what this. Okay, I don't know if you've seen Hannah Gale's chat, so I'll read it if you didn't. She said she cannot talk out loud because her son in the other room is taking an important test. Good morning, everyone, and very excited to hear this talk. So I won't call on Hannah until she raises her hand and says maybe she can talk again. Okay, so now, Howard, I'm turning on record.
Okay, I have mine on also.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. This is our Wednesday virtual coffee where you're all supposed to bring your own refreshments. We are going to hear David Goldstein, who I've been waiting to hear for a couple of years. I know it's going to be wonderful. I'm not going to introduce what he's going to talk about. I'm going to leave that to him. I'm asking all of you to mute yourselves so that there is no feedback. And now I'm going to go around the room, although something just happened. Okay, Dottie, would you please unmute and tell us who you are and how you know David? Unmute, Dottie.
This is going to be slow. It might be better just to read people's names.
Yeah, Dorothy Blanken. I know David for several years now and from Road of Sholem, and I always have admired him. Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you, Dottie. Now mute again. Okay, Marion.
Hey, I know David from Road of Sholem Minion, basically. Right.
Thank you, Marion.
Thank you.
Will you mute? Okay,
Yes.
Howard.
I'm Howard Goldstein. I'm David's brother, so I know him pretty well.
Thank you. Okay, Dottie, you need to mute, please.
I thought
No. Okay, Debbie Bear.
Okay. Hi, I'm Debbie Bear. I know David, as many of you do also, from Road of Sholem, and having rides with Brian. So here we are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Rusty Miriam.
I know David from Road of Sholem, obviously, and from the Minions, and from many, many conversations and emails that we've had. And he is just a delight. Looking forward to his talk today.
Okay, thank you. I see a name I don't know that says Elizabeth Lewis.
That's me. I'm
Okay.
a friend of David's from way back, from Manhattanville college days, when he went to college and majored in classics. And
Okay.
I got to know him then and our family too.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. I told you about Hannah Gale, who can't talk yet. When she's ready, she'll tell me. Nima.
Good morning. My name is Naima Hirsch. I'm the cantor at Word of Shalom, and I meet David quite regularly at services.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jackie Garelick.
Hi, I'm Jackie Garelick, and I know David from Word of Shalom Services. I'm in awe of him before I even hear what he has to say of his abilities and how well he handles himself.
Thank you. Okay, will you mute yourself again? Perfect. Lisa Tischler.
Hi, and just a side note, I think my dad will be joining us. Because it's be nice, quiet for him to just sit and listen. So hopefully he'll be here. But
Great.
David, I used to see at the synagogue and through my dad. I know Dave. Whoops.
Thank you, Lisa. Let's see. Sheila Leaf.
Good morning, I'm Sheila Leaf, and I started to know David when I started coming to Saturday morning services at Rosh Hashanah. And it's a pleasure knowing him. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Judy Zidell.
David and I have had chats at Minion and through emails, and he's always has some pearls of wisdom to share with me.
Thank you, Judy. Mike Klein. Oh, Judy, will you mute, please? Thank you. Mike Klein.
I'm Mike Klein. I'm not sure if I do know David or not, but we might be related somehow because my mother was a Goldstein. So that's
All
it.
right. Well, sometime we will meet.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, Patty.
Good morning, I'm Patty Jenkins. I am David's cousin and Howard's as well, so I've known them all my life, and I'm very happy and excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, welcome. Marcy Gollinger.
Hi, Marcy and Neil Gollinger. We know David through Word of Shalom, and we're looking forward to hearing him today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. Let me see. Erica Cohen. Erica, you have to unmute.
Well, I'll just say that I know Erica. She shares the Kohen Willia with me, and it's very nice to be at the Kiddush table with her and to know that she's an important part of the synagogue.
Okay, thank you. Larry Shire.
Yes, hi, I'm Larry Shire, one of 3 Larrys at the synagogue. So it's good we're using last names. And I know David, of course, from Road of Shalom and various committees. I know the Ritual Committee and various other things there. And I'm just always, and anytime David participates in the service beyond just his usual taking an aliyah or something, I'm just in awe of the things that he does. That it's just amazing. So I'm happy to be here to listen to him.
Okay, thank you. Debbie Bowles.
Hello, I also know David through the synagogue, and I have to say, just like Larry Shire, the one thing that comes to mind is David is very special no matter what, and a very, very special part of our synagogue. But what even makes him even that much more special is he can do something that many of us can't do, and that is he reads Torah in the way he reads Torah. And every time he does, it is just, so many people have smiles on their face. So that's how I know David, through Rod of Shalom. Thank you. Thank you, David, for doing this today.
Thank you, Debbie. Edith. Edith. Matt, I'm running a program. I thought I didn't hang up on you, so I got to talk to you after. Okay, bye. Edith. Okay, there you go.
I've been a David Goldstein fan for all the time that I know him from Road of Sholem. We are neighbors, and he speaks, I listen.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, who, Edith, will you mute again? Let me see now who I've missed. Sharon Sachs.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sharon Sachs. And unfortunately, I have to say that I've never met David in person, which, I mean, had a personal conversation with him. But obviously, David, I've seen you at the synagogue. And as Larry and Debbie both said, when I hear you chant Torah, it really does, I'm in awe of that. I know how it's not easy, and I do hope to have the opportunity to have a chat with you in person someday. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to jump off at 10:30, but I will listen to the recording, Carol.
Oh, you're very optimistic. Okay, thank you. Ernie, I'm glad to see you. Once you introduce yourself, I'm going to ask you to mute yourself.
Okay. My name is Ernie Tischler, and again, I'm one of the many fans of David. Again, his memory is phenomenal. When he davens, not only am I in awe, but all the people that have the honor to hear him, they receive the pleasure. He seems to be so perfect when he davens. He has my total respect.
Thank you, Ernie. So glad you're here. Juliet Vogel, good morning. You need to unmute.
Yeah, okay, I'm unmuted. I don't know David. I grew up in Road of Sholem and I'm out of town member. I'm Marcy's contemporary. And I am very interested in what David has to say, both personally and professionally.
Thank you and welcome. Judy and Lee Gould, would you please unmute?
Okay, want me to say something? All right, Judy and I are new members of Road of Sholem. We're very interested in hearing the speaker today because we heard so much about him. But that's about all we can say at this point.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming. Please mute yourself. Helen Weinstein.
Hello, everyone. I'm Helen Weinstein. I don't know David personally, but I've been with him many times, especially in the chapel, and have great admiration for him, and so glad he's doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Okay, I'm looking at my list because the faces jump all over my screen. If there's somebody I missed, unmute and tell me. Okay, I'm going to read Hannah Gale's message. She said, for those of you who aren't reading in the chat, I am afraid that I won't be able to speak out loud because it would be a distraction. But I wanted to say that I played Annie Sullivan in a production of The Miracle Worker at the JCC on the north side of Chicago with supportive workshops from the Chicago Theater of the Deaf in 1977 in a life-changing experience. Since then, I have always felt close to the story of Helen Keller. I am a great fan of David's writing and scholarship, and am fortunate to call him a friend. So with that, thank you, Hannah, and good luck to your son who's taking the test, a test. So now, without further ado, now that we are all friends of everybody, I give the floor or the screen to our own David Goldstein.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I live up to all the things that you've been saying. But the other really nice thing about hearing you all introduce yourselves is that I can say that, you know, I do go to the synagogue, and it's really hard to meet people there because of all the noise and everything going on. And so I hope that when we do start going back to the sanctuary, that we will find ways to talk to one another, maybe in some quieter place in the hall or something, because I really would like to get to know all of you. So with that, I will go into what I was going to say. I wanted to tell you that I will be reading much of this, and you may hear my braille device clicking. I will try not to read too fast so it doesn't sound like a bar mitzvah speech. And I also hope that it doesn't sound like an audio book, so I give the pause button to Carol. But we will be taking breaks so that we can have some conversation. These days, we see Helen Keller's name on quotations people take from her writings. I found this one in her journal, which describes what I've been up to lately. It says, after breakfast, I wrote and rewrote the speeches until I felt mentally black and blue. So Carol has been asking me to give a talk ever since I told her I had been at the Helen Keller National Center for Deafblind Youths and Adults on Long Island. It's actually on Sands Point, which is adjacent to Port Washington. I've been putting it off because it doesn't feel appropriate to make my actual experience there a conversation topic. The center is on a lovely campus and one of a kind in the world, and fun things go on there. But people go there to find themselves and to learn new skills after a loss of sight or hearing or both. And there's hard personal work going on. But Carol will also tell you that a couple of months ago, I suddenly said I was ready to give a talk. And that was because I figured out how I could sidestep the issue. I listened to a talk last summer about all the wonderful memorabilia that's in the official Helen Keller archives. There's a digital version online, but now there's excitement that plans are underway to move the physical material from cold storage to a museum. Helen Keller has never been a role model for me, but over the years, I found myself in places where she was once, and I've talked to people who communicate the way she did, and that's led to my having done a lot of reading and exploring. News of the archives brought back my interest, and I started thinking about what would be fun to share. So stir up your coffee or dish up some virtual tuna, because this may be more like a lunch and learn. But I will make sure that I stop talking every once in a while so we can get some input from you. For any of you that may be disappointed that I haven't put much about myself into this, the good news is that Carol and the rest of you can bug me to give it another try. So here's the agenda. I want to give you some tidbits about the adult Helen Keller, and then talk about what's going on for a group of very dynamic people around the world who are, the term is deafblind. I will then go back to the beginning of the Helen Keller story about her teacher, Annie Sullivan, and Helen's education. I know many of you have seen the performance of the miracle worker, but I also know some of you haven't. So I'll try to summarize the story and give you some details that are not in the play. And first, there are some local Connecticut notes. You may know that Helen Keller had a house in Easton. I think I saw on Google that the address is 163 Reading Road. It was built for her, and she moved in with her assistant Polly Thompson in 1938, which was 2 years after Anne Sullivan died. She called it Arkin Ridge. She lived there until her death in 1968. Actually, what is there now is the second Arkin Ridge, because the first burned to the ground when she was away in 1946, and it was rebuilt. We know that the grounds had walking paths with rope railings so she could take walks by herself. If you drove by there before 1968, you might have seen an 8-foot metal Japanese lantern she got as a gift on a trip to Japan. It was kept lit as long as she lived there. We know a lot of mail came to that address. A lot of it was from people who just want a little part of her, like a boy who requested a poem in Braille to put in his book report. She did her best to answer everybody, but one thing she enjoyed about travel was that she could get away from the mail. When she was in her 80s and could no longer handle it, secretaries took over the job and had to answer letters asking, "Could Miss Helen please send a lock of her hair?" So I thought we'd take a break now and see if anybody remembers anything about the house or the Helen Keller School that's also in Easton. Carol, you said you've seen it as you've driven by?
I have, and the address is in Braille. The Braille is above the number. It's on a corner. Yes.
I have a memory. Yes. Oh, okay.
All right.
Debbie Bear, you have a memory? You have to unmute if you're going to speak. Okay.
Yes. I was very fortunate to be riding the train from Bridgeport to New York on the Metro Liner years ago. It was in the early 60s. I was with my mother, and I saw Helen Keller with her companion on the train. And I will never forget, as long as I live, the expression on her face. It was so calm. It was so pleasant. She wasn't speaking at all. She was just there, but you knew that she radiated a presence. And just to see her was very, very special.
Thank you, Debbie. For those of you who have who are muted and your video is taken away, you can put your video back on if you can do that. So I see some who we don't see faces: Marcy, Patty, Howard, Sharon, Mike Klein, and Juliet. I'm just telling you that's what I see. Any other comments or questions for David?
I don't want to do my video because it's easier for me to concentrate when I don't have to look at myself.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Okay.
If my memory serves me correct, we passed the Helen Keller School on the way to the best firehouse in Easton, and we were always curious about the building.
That's correct. That is the Helen Keller Middle School. And it is a school for all children. I taught there, and I heard a story once that when children went on a field trip and they got off the bus, the folks who were meeting them thought that it was a school for the blind. And it took quite some doing to explain that it was not. It was named for her. Thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else?
I would just say, growing up in this area, I went to school with a girl whose cousin lived next door to Helen Keller. And she said that a lot of the neighbors would watch. One thing Helen Keller loved to do was walk around her back. She had a lot of flowers intentionally because she could smell the flowers. She couldn't see them, but she could smell the beautiful smell. So she was a big flower fan on her own.
Thank you, Jackie. Anybody else? Okay, David, the screen is yours.
Okay, it's funny, I don't want to disillusion you about the look on Helen Keller's face, but I was reading in her journal that she said that she tried to keep a pleasant look fixed on her face, so to the point that she felt she was taking it to bed with her. So anyway, let me read you a few of the quotable passages people have been using lately, and you'll get a sense of her optimistic attitude. Life is a daring adventure or nothing. Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much. When one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often we look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one that has been opened for us. And this last one, it is wonderful how much time good people spend fighting the devil. If they would only spend the same amount of energy loving their fellow men, the devil would die in his own tracks of ennui. People tell of her enjoying going to hot dog stands, and one biographer says of her, she liked scotch, not tea. So I think along with everything else, she must have been a lot of fun. She lived to the age of 88 and did many different things and spoke out on many issues, and people listened. 50 years after her death, she is still considered one of the world's influential women of the 20th century. She wrote at least 11 books, hundreds of articles, and gave hundreds of speeches, and wrote thousands of letters, and people have written just as much about her. But the truth is that there's a lot we don't know. A lot was lost when the first Arkin Ridge burned down. From what I've read, it appears her helpers at the time worked hard to distill the memories that we have of her. The result is that we have two main images. One, and neither of them may have been important to her. One, of course, was about her as a child, and the other is of a lady who traveled the world drawing huge crowds to hear her messages of goodwill. What isn't remembered quite as well is that she was a proud member of the Socialist Party. She supported workers' unions and spoke at strikes and rallies. She blamed most of the horrible working conditions for the working class on wars on profit-making industrialists. For 40 years, she traveled and spoke and raised funds for an agency called the American Foundation for the Blind. And the State Department considered her their unofficial international ambassador. But everybody was ready to step in with damage control if she said something too controversial. The FBI kept a file on her. But despite that, President Johnson awarded her the President's Medal of Freedom in 1964. There always were and still are people who said she couldn't think for herself, that all she was doing was parroting what her companions told her. I don't think that's the case at all. Her descriptions of how she perceived things were pretty original. She writes about people listening to the news on the radio and how she felt puffs of air coming out of the speaker. And she made big decisions against people's advice. Anne Sullivan and others told her to give up her dream of college, and Radcliffe at that. But she went anyway, and Anne, being the person she was, strained her weak eyesight to read and spell the books into her hands. Most people didn't approve of her politics. Helen even tried to elope with someone. Her childhood fame and later activism gave her friendships with the rich and famous. She spent a lot of time visiting and corresponding with people like Alexander Graham Bell, Pearl Buck, Mark Twain, Woodrow Wilson, Calvin Coolidge, Eugene Debs, Emma Goldman, Margaret Sanger, Albert Einstein, Will Rogers, Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, Andrew Carnegie, and Henry Ford. She realized she had to keep a fine line between the industrialists she was railing against and not alienate the people who she relied on for some financial help. Career-wise, she had hoped she could support her household through writing and speaking, but that didn't provide enough. And besides, she liked expensive clothes and making out checks to her favorite causes. When money got really tight, she and Annie spent 4 years touring the country on the vaudeville circus. Mingling in the public was something Helen loved and Anne hated. And some of the topics she wrote and talked about over the years were faith, women's suffrage, vocational rehabilitation, birth control, philosophy, atomic energy, and even venereal disease. Why venereal disease? Because she was saying that women with gonorrhea stood a chance of having children who got blind from the bacteria getting in their eyes during birth. And so she was advocating for giving newborns eye drops of silver nitrate. I'm not sure if that's a good idea. And anyway, Carol, she said that her most fulfilling speaking moments were her visits to disabled veterans. Hopefully, she listened to what they had to say too. And in 1933, she was so famous for writing and saying what she thought that the Nazis added her books to the list of books for their students to burn. She sent them a telegram, which was published widely in the American newspapers. And it says, "To the student body of Germany, history has taught you nothing if you think you can kill ideas. Tyrants have tried to do that often before, and the ideas have risen up in their might and destroyed them. You can burn my books and the books of the best minds in Europe, but the ideas in them have seeped through 1,000,000 channels and will continue to quicken other minds. Do not imagine your barbarities to the Jews are not unknown here. God sleepeth not, and he will visit his judgment upon you as surely as upon the wicked kings of Judea who defied his word." And as leftist and forward-thinking as she was really old-fashioned when it came to talking about disabilities. Lots of people are still mad at her and feel that many of the attitudes we have to deal with today were caused by Helen Keller. For whatever reason, she could praise strikers and the Wobblies and other organized groups, but she refused to be a part of people with disabilities advocating for change. She could be very patronizing. She was in the camp with Alexander Graham Bell that thought it was their duty to eradicate sign language and deaf culture, and so has the wrath of the deaf community. For blind people, she thought they should have good jobs so they could be independent and good citizens, but declared that everyone should be in sheltered workshops. She even said that doctors shouldn't try to save babies with birth defects. People today are upset that she felt that disabilities should be kept invisible and overcome cheerfully. And apparently she had some strange ideas on women's issues too. All right, another break. Anything you found interesting?
Yeah, it's Sheila. Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Sheila.
Carol?
Yes.
You're there, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Oh.
Okay. It's very interesting hearing about Helen Keller and her biography. I would like to know what David's experience was like at the Helen Keller Center, what his classrooms were like, how he learned to read Braille, and how long he was there for. A little more background on him.
Okay, well, you can ask me directly and I'll tell you a little bit. I was trying to sort of stay away from that in my talk, but I have no reason to. So actually, both I and my brother learned Braille when we were in kindergarten and we went to public school. I eventually went to the famous school called Perkins, but most of our learning was included with other children. And the only reason that I went to the Helen Keller Center was from some additional skills that I wanted to get so I could live independently in my apartment and take care of the cooking and learn a little bit more about cane travel. And as far as the classrooms go, everything there is taught one-on-one because each person is so different, and much of the communication is done by spelling or signing into someone's hand. So it really has to be one-on-one and everybody's at a different level. So
Thank you, David. Thank you.
All right. Well, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how things are going for people who are deafblind since Helen Keller, because that's something you probably will not hear from somebody else. And if you're looking for it, you see some interesting items in the media from time to time. But I should say first that thanks to modern thinking and education and now technology, the majority of people who are deafblind make their own decisions and live independently and have jobs in just about any area you can think of. And you're probably wondering how many people there are like Helen Keller. There are not too many who are totally deaf and totally blind, but there are a lot who have a combination, you know, just a small amount of hearing and sight. We used to say there were 70,000, but now it's saying 2.4 million in the United States. And what we say, the definition is for somebody who is deafblind, is that it's when the combination of the two senses cause unique problems in communication or getting around or social interaction that wouldn't be there if it was just a problem with one sense. So now that, with the process of aging, there are more people approaching that point. And the last time I was at the Helen Keller Center, there were a lot of older people there. And a complicating factor is that each person's situation is different, and a lot depends on which sense was lost first. Someone who loses sight first will probably think in terms of spoken language, whereas others who were born deaf were signers, and as their vision lessens, they will learn to sign by touch. So if you go to the Helen Keller Center, you'll see interpreters using all kinds of different communication methods. You may have read in the New Yorker a few months ago that there was an article about deafblind people worried about the COVID virus because, they depend on being close to people for communication. So that was a real problem. And the Helen Keller Center has been offering seminars in both on Zoom and using sign language so people can stay in touch with each other. Let's see, we are using up more time than I was thinking. So I wanted to tell you that
David, you're okay with whatever it's 10:40, whatever
okay.
the floor is yours.
Okay, all right. Well, one of the people who got this modern thinking going is someone by the name of Robert Smithtis. And I met him at the center and corresponded with him for years. And some of you know that I edited a book of his poetry. Even though he was a worker in the field of deafblindness, he was such a good poet that he was named Poet of the Year by the American Poetry Society. And I should say that all the guests who are here had something to do with that book project. Bob was born 45 years after Helen Keller, and at that time, Anne Sullivan's methods have been really defined and refined. And he wrote a book about his education, which is really fascinating. He talks about learning to lip read by touch, as Helen Keller did. But he didn't stop. He always pushed the envelope. He lived in his own apartment. He commuted to work. Later, he married and owned and maintained his own house. And if you're curious, there's a YouTube interview that Barbara Walters did with him and his wife, Michelle, who is also deafblind, about how they live. And it's kind of interesting. You'd be interested to know in these days of COVID-19 that the reason for the centers coming into being was because of an epidemic. It was the rubella epidemic of 1964, which is German measles. It turns out that children born to mothers who had German measles became deaf and blind and had other problems. And the center was built mostly for them to meet that need when they reached the time when they would no longer be helped by schools and children's services. And my friend Bob spoke before Congress and spoke so eloquently, and this is what I have for you, Ernie. He spoke so eloquently that he brought down the House and the Senate. So anyway, the center is a place where people can go for training and figure out what their careers could be or how they can live on their own. And it's interesting that the government funds it. There's a special Helen Keller Act of Congress. It's one of the few agencies that has its own act. As you can imagine, technology has improved things quite a bit, but there's still a lot of social isolation. Helen Keller called deafblind people the loneliest people on earth. There are several things going on in the news now. Congress is hoping, it has on its docket to pass an act called the Cogswell-Macy Act. That would be a landmark education bill. And you may also have read about someone named Haben Girma. She's the first deafblind person to have graduated Harvard Law, and now she does advocacy around the world. There's also a movie on deafblind issues that's being written up in the Times and winning all kinds of awards for Best Documentary and Film Festival. It's called Feeling Through. And so you may be seeing that on television sometime. And speaking of movies, Helen Keller herself got an Oscar for Best Documentary called Helen Keller in Story. And there was a 1953 film that won an Academy Award. And that was used by the State Department before she visited a country. They would distribute that film. And then the two other people to win Oscars were Anne Badencroft and Patty Duke for The Miracle Worker. So now I thought we would talk a little bit about The Miracle Worker, and I can give you some details. For those of you who don't know the story, it's the main thing that I think children learn about in social studies classes, is that Helen Keller was born in Tuscumbia, Alabama, to a landowning family that probably owned slaves at one time, but this was after the Civil War. Her father was a Captain Keller. And she was really bright and doing really well until 19 months of age, when she contracted a fever that was very high and lasted a very short time, but it left her without any sight and hearing. And she became almost feral. She was pretty much uncontrollable, but she was smart. At breakfast, she would go around and help herself to food on different people's plates. And her mother especially thought that, that somebody could help her. And so my trivia question for the day is, what famous author wrote a book that when Helen Keller's mother read it, it started her really seriously searching for a teacher? Well, the answer is Charles Dickens. He wrote a book called American Notes from a visit that he made to the United States in 1842. And one of the chapters was devoted to his visit to Boston, where he met Samuel Gridley Howe, who actually was the husband of Julia Ward Howe. But Samuel Gridley Howe directed the school, which became Perkins, because it was on the estate of Thomas Perkins. And he had some rather interesting ideas. He was actually looking for a child who was deaf and blind because he wanted to perform some scientific experiments to see how she learned things and whether she picked up religion by herself and things like that. But anyway, when Charles Dickens came, Bridgman was probably about 12, and he wrote so glowingly about her that she was the most famous person in the besides Queen Victoria. And they say that little girls put ribbons over their dolls' eyes. But anyway, it took 40 years for that story to get to Alabama. And eventually, Helen Keller's mother got in touch with the new director at Perkins, and he sent a teacher, Anne Sullivan, and Anne really needed the job. She was really poor. Her parents were Irish immigrants. She had problems with her eyes from the beginning, and her brother had what they call a tubercular hip, and the family couldn't deal with them, and they sent her and her brother away to what they called an almshouse in the town of Tewksbury, Massachusetts, which is really horrible. And when people came to tour the school, she followed them around and said, I want to go to school. And so they took her and sent her to Perkins, and she had a really strong temper, got almost expelled several times, but there was no other place for her to go. And so when this job offer came from Alabama, they put her on a train, sent her to Alabama. And so the play is about how Annie got through to Helen. And the way she decided to do it was to do it the way that people work with babies. When you have a baby, you talk to them all the time. So she fingerspelled into Helen's hand all the time. And of course, she would, give her a doll. And if I had video, I would, Hannah, can you, without your talking, can you do some manual alphabet for us and spell doll and water and things like that?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Oh, good. So Anne would put a doll in her hand and spell D-O-L-L. And it took about a month before Helen got the idea that these were names for things. She liked the idea of spelling. She would even try to get her dog to spell. But the famous scene is with her at a water pump, and had her pumping with one hand and the water coming onto her other hand. And then she took the hand on the handle and spelled W-A-T-E-R. And if you've seen the movie, Helen's face lights up, and then, she got really excited. What is the name for this? What is the name for that? And so that's how the whole story started.
So David.
Yes.
I'm going to stop you for a minute, and I'm going to ask, because it's 10:55, if it's okay with you if people have questions for you before we have to end. Is that
Yes,
going to be all right with you?
That's fine. I'm really finished.
Oh, okay. All right. Let me see. So, okay. If you have a question for David, would you unmute and say your name, and let's do it one at a time, because he's fascinating. I don't know about you, but I was mesmerized.
My name is Ernie Tischler, And again, I was totally memorized and I enjoyed every single word. My question, David, is how do you go up to a person that has these problems? How do you talk to them? And I'm afraid of going and startling them. What is the best way to talk and to meet these people?
Oh, I'm really happy you asked that question, because people forget about the startling parts, and that can be very startling. I think, you get close to somebody, we can usually sense that somebody's there, and if you put your hand lightly on their shoulder, they'll realize that you want their attention. If they have some hearing, you can say the person's name. That always helps me. But the way for somebody who doesn't know the special signs or whatever, most people can understand if you print letters on the palm of their hand. That's one way of doing it. Some people carry around a plate that, like a card with raised letters and braille underneath. So you can put their finger on the letter and spell out things for them. And if you find out they know Morse code and you know Morse code, that's good, because you can do that on any part of the body or even stamp it on the floor. There are ways, and people really like being talked to. That, they always hear that they would love to have talks, but they just didn't know that somebody was there.
Thank you.
Okay. Edith, did you have a question? Okay. Anybody else have a question? So I'm going to make a
Yeah, Carol,
Who's
my
that?
client.
Mine? Okay.
So recently I watched on the new Disney Plus channel a show about the using or training seeing eye dogs. And there was one lady who's an attorney, is going through her second dog now. But instead of reading Braille or typing it, she has a special computer, which is a digital one. And the words just light up, and she just very quickly slides her finger over it. I think the technology has come a long way for people who.
Yeah, I'm actually using the same computer that she has. It's called a Braille Note. And it's not that the dots light up, it's that little pins pop up to form the Braille characters.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, she's sliding her finger faster than you could slice a carrot or something. And it's truly amazing how she could understand that, very quickly with just the tip of the finger.
Yeah, that's the lady I mentioned, Haben Gurma.
David, tell us your relationship with Ellen Bedford.
It's funny, we were in Bridgeport together for many years, and I didn't know about her at all. And then suddenly I got a letter in Braille inviting me to a Cantor's concert. And then I found out that she was a teacher of blind children in Easton, I think. And we got to know each other from there, and we had a lot of fun. And she helped me get ready for my bat mitzvah sheni and all kinds of things.
I don't know if all of you know this, but we did celebrate David's bar mitzvah, which was amazing. Nima can certainly attest to his reading Torah. And when she asks him to participate on Shabbat, he's right there to do it, which is totally amazing. Am I correct?
Actually, I tell her when I'm ready, and she lets me.
Well,
yeah, anyway.
It's amazing, totally amazing. You gave us some information, and I'm trying to write it down here.
Well, I thought maybe I could put together a resource list, and then.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Would you put that website down that you told me about also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, then you can see her.
Okay.
Um, if people have a minute and there aren't any other questions, I thought you might be interested to hear one of the poems that my friend Robert Smith just wrote, because he wrote about deaf blindness. But before I do that, are there any other questions?
Lee Gould. Okay.
Is there a foundation to which we can send contributions for people who are challenged like this?
Well, that's up to you, but you can look up the Helen Keller National Center. The website is hknc.org, but I'll put that on the resource list.
Okay. Does that help, Lee?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, David. We'd love to hear the poem.
Okay. This is one of the things that Bob was telling people again and again, and they didn't quite believe him, was that if you couldn't see or hear, a lot of people thought that there would be no way for them to perceive beauty. And so he wrote several poems about what beauty meant to him. And I've chosen the one that I can read the best. This was written actually to his wife. So it says, I cannot see a rainbow's glory spread across the rain-washed sky when storm is over. Nor can I see or hear the birds that cry their songs among the clouds or through bright clover. You tell me that the night is full of stars and how the winds and waters sing and flow. And in my heart, I wish that I could share with you this beauty that I cannot know. I only know that when I touch a flower or feel the sun and wind upon my face, or hold your hand in mine, there is a brightness within my soul that words can never trace. I call it life and laugh with its delight, though life itself be out of sound and sight.
How beautiful. David, I believe that I speak for everybody here. This was amazing. You are amazing. I learned a lot. My respect for you just grows and grows. I'm honored to call you my friend. And I look forward to many more opportunities and your sharing. Don't think this is the last time you're going to be speaking. If anybody else wants to add.
I second that, Carol. You are absolutely amazing. Your talk today was wonderful, very enlightening, and I look forward to many, many more talks from you and talking to you.
Thank you.
Well, just some of the people I trust. I'll give you a sledgehammer, so if my head gets too swollen, you can set me right.
Okay.
I'll take it.
Who was that? Who was Sheila? Was that you?
Oh, I just echoed your comments, Carol. It was absolutely an amazing, it went by too fast.
Lisa says thank you also. I took lots of notes, and I also about the COVID, like I never even thought about how it's difficult for someone who's blind with the COVID and the touch, because they need the touch. So, and I just learned I have 3 pages of notes. So thank you for teaching us about Helen Keller.
Debbie Bear?
David, I just have to tell you one thing. We are so privileged, and those people who missed your talk this morning don't know what they missed. So next time, if all of us go out and spread the word, you will be enjoyed by so many other people. I feel selfish to know that we participated and enjoyed so much and others did not. So hopefully next time we can spread your light.
Well, actually, people can know what they missed because we recorded it, and if people
Right.
want to hear it, we can play it again. But I'll be happy to do something in person when we can.
Oh, I'm going to write that down. Debbie Bear, you brought tears to my eyes.
Amen.
Debbie Bull sent a message that she had to leave because her children just showed up at her house. And she said, thanks so much to David, much appreciated. Anybody else?
Yeah, I want to say something. Can I
Wait,
speak?
tell me who it is.
This is Patty.
Sure, Patty.
David knows that I love the expression, great job. So you did a great job. It's very clear how much work went into your presentation and how many resources you use. So way to go. Great job. Very, very great talk. Great.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you for coming.
Happy to be here.
Carol?
Mike Klein? Yes.
While I was talking about that with the Disney Channel, I looked it up, and if anybody has it, it's called Pick of the Litter. It's, I think, a 5 or 6 part series of training seeing eye dogs. The ones who pass, that don't. If they don't pass, they could be, if it's a good, healthy female, they'll mate them to get more dogs and everything. But it's a really great show, moving show. And like David said, one of his friends who's the attorney from Washington is in it.
Thank you.
You'll see of getting the dog, training the dog, the people who do it. It's a really good show. So
Thank you, Mike.
the litter.
Edith? No? Oh, somebody's not muted. Okay, and anybody else? So somebody's getting a phone call. Now I'm going to put your brother on the spot, David. Howard, are you still there? Would you unmute? Howard?
Okay, here I am.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot now as David's brother. How proud of him are you?
Oh, I think he did a terrible job.
Okay.
No.
Thank you. Somebody has to say. All right.
It was a great talk. Yeah, I'll echo Patty. Great job.
Thank you, Howard. Only a brother would give the honest truth.
Yes.
Okay.
Or the dishonest truth, if you prefer.
Right. Okay. So the comments in the chats are amazing. That's the word that keeps coming up. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And David, you are amazing. I say it one more time. Thank you.
Maybe the ratings on Coffee and Conversation will go up.
Yes, they will.
Carol?
Yes.
Neil Gollinger, I've been listening, really listening for a half hour. It passed, it almost was like 3 hours. That's the kind of a talk it was. I have a 20-year-old grandson. I want to see that recording. I want him to, he's taking his courses. This was a lesson in perseverance and unbelievable brain power to remember all this stuff. Thank you very much. And Marcy left, but she knows how much I appreciate this. You passed the day for me. I have to go on dialysis today, but by going on dialysis is nothing compared to what David has done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
All
So
right.
as far as the recording goes, I recorded Ernie's 2 weeks ago. I'm
Yes.
working on getting it to a place where it's shareable.
Good.
I recorded David's today. I know Howard did as well, and Nima did. So between the three of us, we should be able to get it to a place that is visible and hearable. So it's going to take a little while. That's not the quick thing. For me, that's the hard thing, but nothing compared to what David did. So I'm going to thank you all. I don't want to keep you past time. And we'll meet again in 2 weeks. Our congregants who have shared, Marion, Ernie, David, we just got a host of gems. So somebody else has volunteered to come forth. I'm going to be working with that person. I'm not going to say who at the moment. And if anybody else has a topic that she would like to share, please let me know. So have a great day. It's pouring out right now. So stay safe, be well, and we'll meet again. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.